Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Mem Gimel of Masechet Sotah. It's the last full daf in the eighth parak, and we are at the Mishnah on Mem Gimel Amud Aleph. I'm going to share my screen, and we can get started. So, yesterday we began our discussion of the pre-battle speeches of the Kohen anointed for war and the officers. And we began that yesterday, and we're going to pick up now with the Mishnah that will continue. Yesterday, we talked about what the Kohen said at the very beginning, and now we're going to have some officers talk. We will find out whether how the Kohen is involved in these conversations in the Gemara. But let's take a look. So we'll jump right in. The Mishnah begins with Diburu Hashotrim Ela'am, so that the Lemor, that they would the officers would speak to the nation, saying, Mi ha'isha asher bana bayit chadash v'lo chanacho yelech v'yashov lebeito. So we're going to talk about three different categories. Category number one is somebody who built a house and hasn't had a chance to sort of inaugurate it. So that person gets to go home because we don't want somebody else to inaugurate the house for him. So that so now we're going to expand the category. Although the pasuk only references house, and the Gemara will explain how we do this, but we're going to now explain it. So echad habona beis tateven. It doesn't make a difference whether you're building a storehouse for grain, beis habakar, a storehouse for cattle, meaning a barn, beis ha'etzim, a house for wood, a woodshed, beis ha'otzarot, or a store or a general storehouse, often thinking about it in connection with food. So in each of those cases, even though it may not be your home, it's considered a home, and for this purpose, and you do not need to stay at war. You can go home. Echad habona, and it doesn't. And when we say built, it doesn't make a difference whether you built it. Echad halokeach, if you bought it. Echad hayorish, if you inherited it. Ve'echad shenitan lo matana, and if it was given to him as a gift. So all of those are included, even if you didn't actually build it. Remarkable, given that the Torah specifically says build. So that's category number one. Umi ha'ish asher nata kerem v'chilo chilu, and who is the person who planted a vineyard and did not redeem it? So again, that person also gets to go home because we don't want somebody else to redeem it. Now, what is this redemption? So Rashi helps us there, and we actually have a three-way debate among Rashi, the Ramban al Torah, and Rambam. So Chilul, Rashi says, b'shanas ha'revi'is, that we're talking about in the fourth year of a tree's life, that in the first 3 years, so then it's Orla, but in the fourth year, it's Neta Rivai, and you can and you are required to treat it like Meiser Sheni. So B'shanasa Revi'is L'netiato, Shechalal Es HaPeiros B'mos, that in the fourth year, that's when you have the ability to redeem the fruit with money, kederach meiser sheni, just as we can redeem the fruit for meiser sheni with money. Umal es amos Yerushalayim va'ochlan, and then you go up to Yerushalayim with the money, and you eat the produce, that you eat the food that you could buy in Yerushalayim with that money. Kediksiv ki kadesh hilulim v'gamar kadesh kadesh meiser, that in connection with this, which I guess was in a very recent parsha, because this is from Vayikra Yud Tet. And we say Gamar, and we learn from this Kadesh Kadesh Mimaiser that it is that the two are connected, and so as a result, you can, just as you can redeem Meiser, you can redeem the Neta Rivai, the fourth year produce from a tree. Okay, and so, however, the Ramban says no. It doesn't mean that you actually redeemed it, and that's when you are now subject to army service, but until the possibility of redeeming. So Rashi says, so that's the earliest of the possibilities, right? Meaning as soon as the fourth year begins or the produce comes out and you have the theoretical possibility of redeeming it to bring it up to Yerushalayim, then you are exempt. But if you have not yet redeemed it, even if you have not yet redeemed it, Ramban would say that you're no longer exempt. Rashi says, no, you have to actually redeem it in order to be able to not be exempt from service. And Rambam says, no, the exemption from service applies until you actually put it in your mouth. If you eat it, then you're exempt. If you don't eat it, you're not exempt. Okay, so, but again, we're going to expand it beyond just one who plants a keren, plants a vineyard. So doesn't make a difference whether you plant a vineyard, or you plant 5 fruit-bearing trees. And even if it's 5, even though chamesh aminim, often when we think about it, we're talking about the 5 species of grains. But that's not what we're referring to here, because this is clearly in connection with the tree. We're talking about 5 different tree types, 5 different fruit tree types. So echad anota, the echad. Okay, so that's the possibility. And by the way, when we say ilanei ma'achal, that is the beautiful picture that Rashi has. When we say that there are 5 trees, if we take a look at the Rashi, we can, it's always nice to do a Rashi that has a diagram in it. So we'll jump to that Rashi. So chamisha ilani machal debahaki havi kerem, and that because that is considered a vineyard. Basically a yard in which one has the production of fruit. Shtaim keneged shtaim, and the shape has to be 2 opposite 2. The achat yotzav zanav, and one going out as a tail. And so you can see that it's in this particular case, it's in Rashi. It looks to me like an upside down house. If you wanted to make it, visible, you could do it that way. You just turn it around, and then looks like a house. But okay, anyway. And now go back into the Mishnah, and we are at the start of the line that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines below the beginning of the Mishnah, and it says echad hanota. It doesn't make a difference whether you're the planter, echad mavrich, or if you do this layering process. And what that refers to is you stick. I didn't realize. I think I've seen this, but I didn't realize that it actually does something interesting or useful. That what you do is you stick a branch that is growing from tree number 1 into the ground, and amazingly, the tree knows that branch is somehow back in the ground. And that branch effectively creates a new root system. And that root system now grows essentially a new tree. So that's what mavrich refers to. And it also applies to somebody who does grafting, meaning you take one tree and put it onto another. And we'll talk about what situation that is in the Gemara. And it doesn't make a difference whether you bought it, whether you inherit it, and even if it was given to you as a gift. Meaning, again, all of these are, even though the Torah only references planting, doesn't make a difference how you end up getting it or how it actually comes into being. If it is a new vineyard for you, then you are going to be exempt from army service. Hello, Mark, and hello, Lori. So we are talking about how you can be exempt from army service in the early days. So we are. Stan is not on. Maybe he had something to do this morning. So, but we do have other people on. So the question. So now we're up to the third of the explanations. We're in the Mishnah on Mem Gimel Amud Aleph, and we. It's 1, 2, 3 again from the Mishnah, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines down. Oh, that's awesome. 10 lines down from the beginning of the Mishnah. Umiya ish. This is the third of 3 categories that the officers will announce exempt you from serving in the military. Again, the first category is if you built the house. The second category is if you planted a vineyard. And in both those situations, we found out that it actually includes more than just building a house. Even if you were to build a barn for your animals, that would be sufficient, and other things as well. And similarly, it's not just an actual vineyard for grapes, but even if you have other kinds of plant trees, that fruit trees, that would also exempt you. And now we come to the third category, umiya isha sher eres isha, if you actually engage, if you've done Erisin, but you have not done Nisuin, so then you would also be exempt. So, and now the Gemara explains, doesn't make a difference whether the woman that you married is a first-time wife and has not been with anybody beforehand, or Esha Almana, and it doesn't make a difference if it's a widow. And frankly, although it's not clear from our Mishnah, it seems like it also doesn't matter even if the person is a divorcee. Afilu shomeres yavam, afilu shama shemeis achev b'milchama. And it doesn't make a difference whether it's a woman whose husband dies before she has any children, and therefore she is now falls to the brothers, and even if it's in that war. So now what you'd have is the following: if what was it? It's a Saving Private Ryan, right? So imagine Saving Private Ryan, but you don't need all of the brothers to die. You just have one of the brothers dies, and that's enough that all of the other brothers should be going to the back of the battle, as we'll see in a moment. I know, that's why I talked about it. So then all of them will return home. So kol elu ve'elu, in all of these cases, meaning in the case of somebody who built a house, in the case of somebody who planted a vineyard or fruit trees, and in the case of somebody who married somebody, shomin divrei kohen ma'arche milchama. They actually have to go and hear the words of the Kohen. The Kohen made that first statement that we talked about in the last Mishnah and in the Gemara before the Mishnah that we're currently dealing with. That's the statement about not being afraid. And that statement that the Kohen said, right? So they need to hear it. And then they'll hear these officers speak, b'chozrin, and then that's when they go back home. But they actually don't go back home completely, because what do? They actually go to the rear of the front, and they supply water and food to the troops. And they build the roads, because infrastructure, even the Gemara recognized and the Mishnah recognized even before the Gemara. So this is almost 2,000 years ago. We recognize that infrastructure is key to a battling force. Today's modern army, almost 90% of service people are involved in infrastructure, with only about 10%, at least in the United States Army. Israel has one of the highest percentages or lowest percentages of back office staff. But in any event, that is that there's this recognition that it's important to engage on the back end, the rear flank of an army, and the supply lines are crucial to an army's success. Now, here are people. So that's category number one: are people who go out to the field, go out to the battleground, and then they go not home all the way, but they go back to the rear guard and help with the service. But these people don't return at all, meaning that, as we'll see in a moment, they actually will stay in the battlefield. Habona base shar achsadra umir peset. If all you build is a gatehouse, a portico, or some kind of here it defines it as a gallery, but it's often it's like a patio. Hanoda arba ilane ma'achal v'chamisha ilane srak. If you plant only 4 fruit-bearing trees, so you don't actually meet the requirements, or you plant 5 non-fruit-bearing trees, meaning non-fruit-bearing trees don't count towards this. Hamakzir es gerusha, and one who takes back his divorcee. So that's how I suggest that it seems like even though from the beginning it seems like a divorcee doesn't get counted, here it seems like a divorcee does get counted, except if you take back the divorcee that you yourself divorced. So in addition, who else doesn't get to go back home? Almana l'kohen gadol, and almana a widow who's taken by a Kohen Gadol. It's interesting that the Mishnah seems to be suggesting that even the Kohen Gadol might actually go out to fight. I think the Rishonim suggest that this is a situation where the Kohen Gadol has volunteered to fight, but he would not necessarily be obligated to fight. And so, but a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry a widow, and so that will not provide him a basis to go home. Similarly, a divorcee or a chalutza to an ordinary Kohen. Mamzeret Nesina Yisrael. Mamzeret is one who has inappropriate lineage, and a Netina is one who's from these groups that were not, properly converted Yisrael, and they marry Yisrael. They're not allowed to do that. Bas Yisrael l'mamzer, or the daughter or the person who is in the battlefield is the mamzer of the nasin, and the person that that man married was a regular Yisrael, and he's not allowed to marry her because he's a mamzer or a nasin. So that's going to be a problem. Lo hayachozer. So in all these situations, the husband doesn't get to go home. Rabbi Yehuda Omer av habona bayis al mechono lo hayachozer. Similarly, if you build a house, just as you can't take back the wife that you married, if you build a house on its original foundation, so then you don't get to go home. So that doesn't count. So I want to query whether in modern times this concept of building on a foundation has become very important, especially in New York City, where if you build on the foundation, you don't have to, get all of the necessary same kinds levels of approvals as if you were not to build on the foundation. So just an interesting question to what extent that would apply in our modern setting of it, but it would certainly seem like that could potentially apply. Although if you expand the house, then arguably that would be sufficient because you created additional living space. Okay, so Rabbi Eliezer says, similarly, if you built a house of bricks in Sharon, now it's not clear whether the Sharon refers here to the bricks or to the place of the bias. But Rashi understands, as we'll see in a moment. Let's just jump to Rashi. This daf does not have any tosos on it, so we have one of those unique dafim where Rashi is on both sides of the page, and Levanim B'Sharon is actually the first Rashi on the left-hand side of the page. It actually begins bottom of the right side, but we can just pick up from there. That what does it mean by the bricks in Sharon? Makom hu sheshmo Sharon. There's a place called Sharon. The ein hakarka yafet levanim, and the land there is not good to make bricks. V'lo havi davar kaima, and so as a result, the bricks don't last. That twice in every 7 years, I missed the Shapamayim. I got to update my edit, but the bottom line is that I'm sorry, I didn't scroll. So the bottom line is that you'll end up needing to rebuild the house twice every 7 years. And so as a result, that kind of impermanence is going to, Rabbi Eliezer says, is not sufficient to allow you to be exempt from army service. Now, we've now talked about two prior categories. One is the people who go to the battlefield and then return to serve as the rear guard, helping with the supply lines. And we talked about people who have to stay on the battlefront, namely the people who, if you marry your own divorcee or you marry somebody you're not allowed to marry in the first place. And now we're going to talk about people who don't move from their place at all, meaning that they don't even have to leave to go to the battlefield. So, bana bayis v'chanacho, if you built a house and you inaugurated it, but you have not lived there for a full year, nata kerem v'chilolo, if you planted your field and you redeemed it, but you did not yet enjoy the fruit for a full year, hanose as arusa so, or if you actually married the arusa, and you did nisuin, but you did not live with them. So essentially, what's odd here and I'll just put words to it, is that immediately before these 3 moments, you have to go to the battlefield, and then you have to serve in the rear guard. But if you, in fact, take these additional steps, then you don't even have to go to the battlefield at all. What's interesting to me about this is, and Hakonis as Yevimto. And along the same lines, if one takes in the Yevama who is Zukukin to him, so then again, that is a situation where, again, for the first year, you don't have to go. And this is, of course, the concept that during the first year of marriage, the couple is treated differently. But what's interesting here is that it creates a significant incentive to take the additional step and not stick in the step that actually makes you exempt from battle. Because yes, you're exempt from battle, but you're still on the battlefield. But if you take the additional step, you actually redeem your fruit. You actually inaugurate your house. You actually perform the nisuin, or you take in the yavama. Then you get a full year of not even having to leave your house. Of course, after that year, then you become once again a full conscript back into the army. All right. And how do we know about this? Because there's another verse in the Torah. We've been quoting Dvarim Perek Kaf Pasukim Aleph through Tet, but now we have another source that is the source for this. Shene'amar Naki Yiyeh Leveito Shana Achat. There, for 1 year after you've taken your wife, you are exempt. So, and how does that show all of these? It seems like the natural understanding is only about a husband who takes a wife. Leveito Zebeito. So the fact that it actually says that for his house, we didn't have to use that word. Wasn't necessary. So Beito shows that if you actually build a house, you also get to be exempt for that same year. Yehiyeh, again, the word Yehiyeh was not necessary. We could have just said Nakisha Na'achat, that he is exempt for 1 year. And so the Yehiyeh, that tells us Zek Karmo, that also includes his vineyard. The Simachas Ishto, of course, Zoe Ishto, making his wife happy, that tells us that he's not, that when we're talking about marriage, and of course, again, that one's obvious. Asher Lakach, and then the fact that it refers to Lakach, he doesn't need to say Lakach, he could have just said Es Ishto. So Lahavi Es Yevimto, so it also includes bringing in your one's Yevama. So Ein Maspik in Mayim Umazon, and these not only they don't go out of their home at all. So they don't actually do the food and water. They don't supply water and food. And they don't do the infrastructure. So that's why it's important to distinguish between these categories and the other categories. Okay, so any questions before we go on with the Gemara? So now the Gemara is going to clarify some of the things that we talked about. First we're going to quote and clarify several brises regarding who is speaking, because of course the natural understanding, and even our Mishnah, which began, right? Our Mishnah began by saying the Dibru Shotrim, the officers spoke. So it seems clear that that's who's talking. Well, Tana Rabbanan, it's going to see that we're going to make it more complicated. The Dibru Shotrim, the officers are going to speak. Yachol Dvarim Shel Atzman. You might have thought that this was all them speaking, meaning that they're speaking their own words. Now, what does it mean to speak one's own words? So it's important to remember the usage of callers in those days. They did not have microphones. They did not have megaphones. Therefore, what they would do is there would be somebody who had a very powerful voice who would repeat over what was being said. And so what we're hearing here is, the question is, are these clearly the people in the audience are hearing directly from the officers? That's why it says the Dibru HaShotrim, the officers will speak. Now, Yachol Dvarim Shel Atzman, I might have thought that it was their own words, meaning that they were the initiators of the conversation. But Kishahu Omer, in the later pasuk, it says Vayasfu HaShotrim. The Shotrim, the officers, are going to add. meaning they're going to say their own thing. Well, harei dvarim shel atzman amor. Well, that's clearly when they're speaking for themselves. Well, hamani ani makayim v'dibru shatrim. So then, in that case, how do we fulfill the concept of the shotrim, of the officer speaking in the first place? Well, this is how. The divrei meshruach milchama kasu medaber. We're talking about where the one who is anointed, the Kohen who is anointed for war, will do the initial speaking, and they say over those words. Ha-ketzad, how does it happen? Kohen medaber v'shoter mashmiya. The Kohen himself would actually speak. So these exemptions would be announced by the Kohen HaMashiach, the one who was anointed for war, and HaMashiach. And then the shotrim would be mashmiya. The officers would actually project the wording so that everyone would be able to hear. Now we're going to, so we've now taught the basic principle, and this basic principle of recognizing that these statements about the person who's built a home, planted a vineyard, or married somebody, or done erusin with somebody, those three statements are going to be initially said by the Kohen, and then the officers are going to speak them out. So that fact that we have something that's being said by a Kohen initially and then projected by the officers now will help us understand three apparently conflicting brises, because Tanichad Kohen Medaber v'Shoter Mashmiya, because we've got one brisa where it says that the Kohen speaks and then the officer makes heard. V'Tanya Idach, we have another brisa, Kohen Medaber v'Kohen Mashmiya, that the Kohen speaks and the Kohen makes heard. V'Tanya Idach, and we have a third brisa that says Shoter Medaber v'Shoter Mashmiya, that the officer speaks and the officer makes heard. So Amar Abaye Ha-Ketzad, how do we have this? Well, we got three different parts of the psukim in this parsha, in the psukim Aleph through Tet and Parakuf of Parshas Dvarim, of Sefer Dvarim. Me, the Nigash ad v'dibro. So from the very beginning until the officers speaking, Kohen medaber v'Kohen mashmiya. So the opening words, the Kohen is responsible for speaking them, and the Kohen is responsible for making them heard by everybody. Mividibro ad v'yasvu. But then when it comes to the second statement that the officer is speaking, which we might have otherwise thought that it was all the officers doing it on their own, Kohen medaber v'shoter mashmiya. The Kohen is the one who says the words initially, and then the officers help it be heard by all the people. And then midiyasvu ve'elach, when it comes to the officers adding on to it, shoter medaber v'shoter mashmiya. The officers are the ones who speak the initial words, and the officers are the ones who make it heard. Okay, so now we've explained it all so beautifully. Yeah. And okay, you're gonna go downstairs? Okay.
Yeah, for the Torah.
No worries. Enjoy the Torah reading at YCT. Okay, yeah. So Mia Isha Sher Banavaya Chadash. So who is, so now the first, so now we're going to talk about each of the what?
Hey, for the journal.
Oh, wonderful. I'm so glad to hear. So I look forward to seeing you at the journal dinner. Mia Ish, which is going to be on June 5th or June 12th, June 11th, June 11th. So June 11th. So make a quick plug. 6 o'clock. Great. Plug for June 11th, 6 o'clock, HIR's annual journal dinner. So Mia Isha share. So now we're going to go through the three categories, right? So we had three categories. One who builds a house, and we're going to show how, in fact, all the aspects of building a house are covered. Then we're going to go and deal with the vineyard. And then I think that might be it. We'll see how far we can get. So Mia Isha share Banavai Chadash. Who is the person who built the house? Who's the man who built the house? And we're going to let him go back to the back of the army and serve the water and the food and deal with the supply lines and the roads and the infrastructure. So Tana Rabbanan, we have a brisa. Asher Bana, that if given the fact that we say that he built, ainly Asher Bana, that would only tell me that it's got to be somebody who built a house. How do I know that if somebody bought it or inherited it or it was given to him? It also counts as a gift. It also counts as somebody who's now got a new house and is going to be exempt. Talmud Lomar mi ha'ish asher bana. Because as Rashi points out, you did not have to use the word ha'ish. It could have just said mi asher bana, whoever has built. And the fact that it says who is the man who built, so that tells us that it doesn't make a difference. Any man who is like one who built is going to be included. Buy it, and liela buy it. And now we've got another problem, right? Because our Mishnah talked about how it was not just a house, but could also include barns and storehouses. So now so again, the word buy it tells us a house. How do Minayin Larabos Beit HaTeben, Ubeit HaBakar, Ubeit HaEitzim, Ubeit HaOtzarot? How do I know about a grain house, a granary, a barn, a woodshed, and a storage facility for food? Talmud Lomar Asher Bana. Again, it says who built Mikol Makom. Doesn't make a difference, even though it didn't need again to use the words Bana, Asher Bana. It could have just said buy it. And so as a result, that the fact that it did that as well, again, Mikol Makom, it teaches us that it doesn't make a difference where it was. Okay, so Yokol Shani Marabe Av Habone Beit Shar Achsadra Umar Peset. Well, 1 second, maybe I might think that that it was sufficient to that it would be sufficient to build any kind of house, even a gatehouse, a portico, or some kind of patio. Talmud Lomar, buy it. No, the fact that it said a house, so it can't be anything. Ma bayis haroy l'dira, af kol haroy l'dira. It's got to be something that is fit for creating living space. So even though these other storage facilities aren't actually going to be used to store for people to live, the fact that it is fit for people to live, because you can't have water seeping in to any of these storage houses. You can't, wouldn't be a good place to live. So therefore, it's like a place to live. So as a result, that's going to be sufficient. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, and this is a interesting disagreement. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says in this brisa, bayit kimashmao. No, house means house. All the other things, the barn, the storage houses, they don't work. You can't. That's not enough. All right. So lo chanach v'lo chanacho, and so now again going back to the pasuk, it says that he has not inaugurated it, but it doesn't say. It could have said lo chanach, but now it says v'lo chanacho. It says he did not inaugurate it. Chanacho, the last vav there is instead of he has not inaugurated. It has not inaugurated it. So Rashi explains that second to last Rashi on the daf, midulog siv chanach, because it didn't say chanach, havi miuta chancho lezeh v'lo la'achar prat legazol b'habayit. So the point is that it comes to exclude, as we go back into the Gemara, prat legazlan, comes to exclude a thief. It's got to be his house. Now, I don't understand. The Gemara points out, Lema delok Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Well, 1 second. This may not be like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, because what did Rabbi Yossi Aglili say? Di Rabbi Yossi Aglili ha'amar v'rach alevav zoa misyarei. As we turn to Mem Gimel Amabet, me'averot shebiyado. That this is somebody who's afraid of sins. That when we say that somebody who's afraid can go home, we're talking about somebody who's sinned. And so as a result, if somebody actually stole a house, of course they're not going to be stuck in the battle, because they're going to be afraid due to their sins. So doesn't that show that this language can't be like Rabbi Yossi Aglili? No, afilu tema Rabbi Yossi Aglili. You can actually say it's even Rabbi Yossi Aglili could go into avad tshuva v'yahev demei, because we could say that this is somebody who did tshuva and then gave money to pay for the house. So they actually bought the house that they had originally stolen. Well, ihachi haba le'lokeach lahadar. Well, 1 second, if he actually stole it, if he actually paid for it, well, then he's a buyer. And so let him be able to return home, or at least return to the back of the battlefield. No, Kaven to Mikara Bitoras Gazela Asalide. Excuse me. Kaven to Mikara Bitoras Gazela Asalide Lo. Because it got to his hands through theft, we're not, even though now he has redeemed it in a way that is available, that is a situation where he's able to, where now it's in his possession, because it started in his possession as a theft, we're not going to allow him to take advantage of the exemption. So that is the story about building. Now we turn to the vineyard situation, and we're going to go through that in a similar way to show exactly how we expand. Again, the Mishnah said not only a vineyard, but also one who plants fruit trees. So let's take a look and see how we do it. Again, the next one verse is going to say that who is it that planted a vineyard and didn't get a chance to redeem it and didn't get to, and we don't want somebody else to be able to redeem it. So Tanurabanan Asher Nata Ein Liela Nata. Well, 1 second, that verse specifically talks about planting. How do I know that it applies to somebody who bought it, inherited it, or got it as a gift? Talmud Lomar Miha Ish Asher Nata. Again, who is the person Asher Nata? Meaning we didn't need to even talk about this Ish. So the fact that we're talking about the Ish, that tells us that we're talking about a category that is expanded, and it doesn't make a difference how it came to his possession. Well, Kerem, the fact that we talk about vineyard, Ainli Ela Kerem, I would think that it, again, you read the pasuk, you don't think that it applies to other kinds of fruit trees. You think it only applies to a vineyard. So how do I know that it covers 5 fruit trees that are even of different species from one another? Well, Talmud Lomar Asher Nata. Again, if we take a look at the sort of the passive version of Asher Nata, who planted, it doesn't make a difference what kind of planting. Well, that case, Yachol Shani Maraba Anota Arba Ilane Machal V'Chamisha Ilani Srak. Well, 1 second, if we don't care what was planted, well, then even somebody who planted only 4 fruit trees or planted 5 non-fruit bearing trees, why shouldn't they also get to go? Shouldn't they also be able to go back home, or at least go to the back of the battlefield? So Talmud Lomar Kerem. That's why the Torah specifically referenced the word Kerem. So the fact is that we expand Kerem, but it's not, but it's still subject to some degree to the concept of Kerem. So you need to have, it needs to be fruit bearing, and you need to have sufficient that it would be considered some kind of vineyard, some kind of fruit-bearing field. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, just as he said bias means buy it, he says kerem kimashma'o. Kerem means kerem. It's a vineyard, great. If it's not a vineyard, tough luck. Okay. So lo chilel, v'lo chilelo, right? Again, just as we had the pasuk earlier, where we said that it could have said chanach, and instead it said chanacho. So here too, it could have said chilel, that he redeemed, that is not redeemed, and instead it says velo chilelo, that he's not redeemed it. So prat lemavrich u'markiv. So that comes to exclude one who grafts or puts it into the ground, mavrich is to put it into the ground, to put a branch into the ground and let it grow roots, and markiv is to do grafting. Now, this, of course, disagrees with our Mishnah, and so that's, of course, the question that we're now going to ask. Well, 1 second, this brisa that we're quoting is v'ha anan tanan echad hanoteya ve'echad hamavrich ve'echad hamarkiv. Well, 1 second, our Mishnah says explicitly that we're talking about one who actually planted, or one who layers, and one who grafts, and all 3 of them get exempted, and the one who layers and the one who grafts as well. So that seems to be completely the opposite of the brisa that we're teaching right now. So now we're going to have 2 answers of this question. The The first of the answers, which is offered by Rabbi Zera in the name of Rav Chisda, we're going to offer, then we're going to ask some questions about it, and finally confirm that it's a valid answer. And then we're going to offer a much, much simpler answer to this question. So stay tuned for that, because we'll get to it as we close out today. So Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rav Chisda. So what's the answer? Again, we have our Mishnah says that one who does layering and grafting, they can get exempted from battle, whereas the Brisa that we just quoted says that they do not get exempted from battle. So Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rav Chisda, lo kasha kan bahar kavas isur, kan bahar kavas heter. Well, the question is, what type of grafting did you do? If you did permitted grafting, well, then, of course, you would be subject to the exemption. But if you do prohibited grafting, well, then you're not going to be subject to the exemption. Meaning, if you graft one species onto a different species, so there's a problem in connection with kalayim, well, then you're going to have a problem. But if you do it in a permitted way, well, then that's totally fine. Well, hi, harkavas heter hechidami. Well, what type of permitted grafting is it that you're talking about where the new tree is going to be considered a new tree? Well, ilema yalda biyalda, if you say that it's a new tree on another new tree, well, tepikle debai meder mishum yalda rishona. Well, shouldn't the person be exempt because of the original young tree? Why do you need to even mention grafting? So el yalda bizakena, it must be that you're grafting a new tree on an old tree. Well, 1 second, but v'ha'amar Rabbi Abahu yalda shesivcha bizakena. If you graft a young tree on an old tree, batla yalda bizakena, we say that the young tree is nullified to the old tree, and it's considered, the combination is considered an old tree. The ain bud din arla. And there's no Orla requirement, meaning you don't have to wait the 3 years in the first place. So the whole concept that we're talking about seems to not apply. So how could we say that if somebody's doing a grafting in that manner, that they should be exempt from any service? So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, la'olam yalda biyalda. No, really we are talking about young grafting onto a young grafting. So now we have to deal with the question of why wouldn't the owner be exempt for the original young tree? And so we're going to answer that. Ukigon, that the first tree that you planted, you didn't plant with an intention to grow fruit, even though it is a fruit tree. You planted it with the intention to grow wood or to make it a fence. And we have a Mishnah to Tanan, this Mishnah which is in Orla. It's literally the first Mishnah of Orla, Hanoteya Lusiagu Koros Pater Mina Orla, that if you in fact plant not to grow fruit, but to create a fence, you use the tree as a fence, or to create wood for beams, that tree is not subject to the Orla restrictions. So Umayshna Yalda Bizakane Devatla. Well, now it's second. We have an interesting situation, because in the situation where you have the young tree on the old tree, we said that the young tree is going to be batal. Right? If the young tree is being put onto an old tree, that gets nullified, and the old tree is what matters. But here, in this new situation where one had an original tree that is young, that was planted for fencing or beams, and now you graft onto it another tree, another young tree, and with the intention for fruit, Maishna Yalda Biyalda Delo Batla. And yet here, in this case, the original young tree the original tree on which you are doing the grafting does not nullify the new graft. Again, the old tree nullifies the new graft, but now this new tree this young tree that is being grafted on the young tree that was being planted, that was originally planted for a fence or beams, is not nullifying the graft. So we have two exact same situations. You graft tree B on tree A, and in one of the situations, tree B is bottle to tree A, and in the other situation, tree B is not bottle to tree A. Now, of course, you could say, well, maybe it's just because it's a young tree, and so it's a little bit less significant, but that is not the direction that the Gemara goes in. Well, here's the direction that the Gemara goes in. Hasam I mimlich Allah lav bas minadarki. That in the situation where it's old, whatever the person's mindset doesn't matter, because it's already exempt from Orla. There's no way you can go back to Orla. But Hacha, mimlich Allah base mahader lahi, if in fact he decided to change it and make it into a fruit tree, it would be subject to Orla. So to Ikarla Perikaima, because originally it was standing to bear fruit. And so as a result, because in that situation, you have the ability to change the underlying tree when you graft something onto it that you're grafting to grow fruit, we're going to say that actually has its own significance and can be subject to Orla. Okay. And therefore, when you grew the tree originally, it was not going to exempt you, but now you did the grafting and it's for fruit. And so as a result, now we can apply the exemption to you. So now that we've taught that, midi dehava alu me'elehen, and the fact that that we have this concept that something could be covered by Orla without a specific intention can be highlighted in the following Mishnah. Ditnan, we have this Mishnah, which is the second Mishnah in Orla. If you have a tree that grows on its own and it's a fruit tree, even though you didn't specifically have an intention for it to bear fruit, because that's the nature of the tree. So again, that shows how the nature of the tree makes a difference. And so too here, when you had the original intention, although your affirmative intention to make it into a fence or a wood-bearing tree, a tree to bear wood, to create wood beams, is enough to take it out of Orla. When you just do a grafting for fruit, that's enough to redeem, to sort of bring back its inherent status as a fruit tree. Okay, so now the question is, why not just say that? Why did you have to answer that we are talking about a situation where the original tree was for fencing or for wood? Why not say that the original tree was not owned by the same guy, and now we have a partnership? And so now one partner and the other partner can each become separately exempt. Well, the answer is the high hadar. So why not say that we're talking about a vineyard with two partners, one owning the host tree and one owning the graft? The high hadar adire, that the one who was returning, the original one was returning because of his property. The high hadar adire, and the other one returns for his property. So why not say that that's the situation? So Amara Papa Zosameris, this teaches us that if you in fact have a partnership, that is not going to get you out of battle. So that even if you have a partnership with a new vineyard, that isn't going to get you out of battle. Now, one second, if that doesn't get you out of battle, why? What about the following situations? What happens if you have 5 brothers? One of them who's married without children dies in battle, and now all the other 4 brothers get to return home. But there's only one woman, there's only one wife that didn't have children, and yet we're going to say that that all 4 of them return home. So there seems to be an aspect of partnership to each of them. Well, there's difference. Hasam kochad b'chad karina be ishto. Each of them can call this woman his wife. So hach kochad b'chad lo karina be karmo. But in that situation of the vineyard that is a partnership, none of the partners can call it his vineyard. It's their vineyard, not his vineyard. Okay, so Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak explains that actually we can give a completely no. So now Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says we don't have to say that the situation of grafting is a young tree onto a young tree. We can create a different situation that where the tree that is being grafted onto something where the original item would not result in an exemption, but now that you did a grafting, it creates an exemption, because we could say b'mavrich ilim biyara. We're talking about a situation where you graft a tree onto a vegetable. And the high Tanahu, and this Tana, and who is the following? We're following the Pacific, and the person who taught this brisa that says that grafting is going and the person who taught our Mishnah rather that says that grafting is going to work. Titania is also one of the Tanaim in the following brisa, where it says Hamavrach ilim biyarek, if you graft a tree onto a green. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel mater. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says that it's permitted. Mishum Rabbi Yehuda ben Gamda ish Kfar Akko, based on what Yehuda ben Gamda from Kfar Akko said. But the Chachamim Osrim, the Chachamim say that it's prohibited. So another way. So again, our first answer is that it's talking about is the grafting permitted or prohibited, and so and when the grafting is permitted, we have to explain why the original tree, because we said that it's got to be young on young, because young on old, the young we don't count, and so as a result, it's got to be young on young. So as a result, but in that case, why doesn't the original young growth exempt you? Why does putting something onto it is the only thing that causes the exemption? And we have two answers. One answer is that originally the young growth was for wood or for to create a fence, and now you added to it a graft that you wanted for the fruit, and so as a result, that now fruit can exempt you. Or alternatively, the original growth was not a tree in the first place. It was just a vegetable. So the vegetable is not able to create an exemption for you. And we're following the opinion of the one who says that you're allowed to do a graft of a tree onto a vegetable. And now that you've grafted the tree onto the vegetable, that tree is able to exempt you from service. So, Kiyasa Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan, when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, so he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, hi, Mani. 1 second. I said that we were going to come up with a much easier answer, and here's the easier answer to the whole question. And again, the whole question is, we have a Mishnah that says that one who layers or grafts is exempt from battle, and we have a brisa that says one who layers or exempts is not exempt from battle. So we can make it very easy. Who is it that say, Mani, who is it that says that grafting and layering is not exempt from battle? Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. That's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, because remember, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is the one who says, Lo am Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Hasam Karen Kimashmo. A vineyard means a vineyard. So Hachinami, not a kamashmo. He also would say that planting means planting. It doesn't cover other things. So nota in mabruk u'markiv lo. So if you did the planting, you're fine. If you didn't do planting, if instead you did something else, that would not be fine. And so that explains our answer. Our Mishnah is not according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and the brisa that says that it doesn't exempt you is according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So that's a wonderful answer. All right, so now that we've come up with these two answers, and now that we've quoted a story in which Rav Dimi says something in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, upon coming from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, so we're going to have two more such statements, and then with those two statements, we'll conclude. Ki asa Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. So Rav Dimi said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, who said in the name of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Yalda bechusa mitefach. If you've got a little tree, I'm thinking bonsai, but bonsais I don't think they have fruit. So a tree that is less than a tefach tall, even though it is actually an older tree. Chayeves ba'arla kol shnoseha. it's chayiv in orla for all its years. Meaning, if that you've got a stump tree that somehow never grows, it's as if they're talking about anything that I've ever grown in my entire life. It almost never grows at all. So no matter how long I wait. So the mechazia kivas shasa, because it looks like it's only a year old, it will always be subject to orla and always be prohibited. And now Rav Dimi qualifies what he said. V'hani mili, when we say this, shtayim keneged shtayim v'achas yotza zanav, we're talking about 2 by 2 with a 1 coming out. That's what Rashi quoted earlier. The 5 trees have to be in the shape of a square plus 1 above or below or to one of the sides. So aval kule kerem, if you in fact had that, so what this is talking about, if you have the 5 trees that are baby trees. But when it comes to a kerem, when it comes to an entire vineyard, if you've got an entire vineyard or entire field of trees, meaning it's more than just the bare minimum, you've got an entire field of diminutive trees or vines, well then kala isla. Everybody knows how long you've worked over this field and still not seen these vines or trees grow. And so as a result, people will know that you are not, in fact, eating arla. So that was statement number 1. And statement number 2. So meis tofes arba amos l'kriyashma, that when it comes to a deceased, it takes up 4 amos when it comes to kriyashma. What does that mean? It means that one should not say kriyashma within 4 amos of a dead body. Why? Because diksiv loeg larash Cheriv osohu, that one who mocks a pauper is blaspheming God, the one who made him, and so as a result, though, who is the pauper in this situation? The understanding is the pauper is one who is dead because he has no ability to perform mitzvot. And so as a result, we should make sure to take advantage of our opportunities to perform mitzvot in lifetime, but we should not do it in the close proximity of somebody who's dead, because that seems to show a mocking kind of attitude to the deceased. So with that, we're going to conclude. And we've now taught, we're in the middle of a tangent. And so, where are we going to turn next? We're going to have some additional statements of Rabbi Yitzchak in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, in the name of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So again, Rav Dimi's made some statements of Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and now we're going to have some statements of Rabbi Yitzchak in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, in the name of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. And so what are those statements going to be about? Well, for that, you're going to have to stay tuned to tomorrow's daf. And tomorrow, God willing, we will finish the 8th chapter and begin the 9th and final perek of Masechet Sotah. Sorry that this went on a little bit longer than I expected, but hope that you have a fabulous day and look forward to continuing our learning tomorrow.
Thank you. I won't be here tomorrow because I have a teaching commitment.
Okay, well, we'll miss you, but
you'll
get the recording is circulated every day if it's helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Be well. Have a great day, everybody.